Hey, everyone. Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And we also want to welcome to our show today, Ellie Leonard. So, Ellie, I'm going to try to get this right. Ellie is a contributing editor for Blue Amp Media. She authors The Panicked Writer. She calls herself a citizen journalist, but she's quit her full-time job late last year to basically do this full-time, and she's become known for being the source on all of these Epstein documents, because literally, Ellie, you are going through them page by page. Yeah. Did I get that right?
That's about right.
Oh my goodness. So go ahead, Senator.
Well, so the first things first, you got some Montana connections, Ellie, is that right?
Yeah,
correct.
A little bit. So I lived, before we moved here, we're on the East Coast now, but before we moved here a couple years ago, we were in just south of Missoula for about 10 years. And then I was born and raised in Washington State, but I spent every summer vacation, every holiday in Fort Benton, Montana on the High Line. And so that I probably know that place better than anywhere else, even my hometown.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, because your granddad had the Ford dealership, right, in Fort Benton?
Yeah, he had Power Motors. Yeah.
That's it. Ford dealership.
Ellie,
that's where I got my first car.
We have all these people joining us who probably don't know where Fort Benton, Montana is, but I know you said you had some questions for John Tester about the High Line, or you could talk about wheat too. So we could get some Montana niceties out of the way here before we dig into the awful subject of Jeffrey Epstein.
For sure.
So that the folks know we're listening, Fort Benton is the birthplace of Montana. It's where the paddle boats came up the Missouri, and that was their last stop. And they unloaded everything there, and then went to places like Helena and Butte and all over the country, of the state anyway. And so it's a pretty cool little town. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, it's one of my very favorite places. We used to, when I was very little, my dad and my uncles and my grandpa, we would go up there, and they were still cutting wheat. And it was when the railroad was still active. So we'd actually have to go down the hill, and then they would suck the wheat out of the railroad into the grain bins. And then I was thinking about like how far we've come in life. But like, I remember something they would do like on a Saturday night, like all the cousins, you'd throw them all in the back of a pickup truck, and they would go, because there was gophers everywhere, and they would go and like pour poison in the holes of all the gophers. And that was like a big family activity. And like, how terrible that sounds now, but that was like a big family event with all the like baby cousins, and like we're just like little kids with poison and holding things that are probably cancer causing. And this is farm life, I guess.
Yeah, well, now you do it with a 22 and give them lead poisoning.
See, I
have a question for you. I've got a question for you, John. So this is something I can't find in the newspapers, but when I think it was 1993, there was, during the swim meet, and I know that Big Sandy and Carter and everybody would come for the swim meet in Fort Benton every summer. That was like the big event. But we had a neighbor down the street from us named Mike Musil. And Mike Musil lived on the corner, and he was kind of like a wild mountain man, and everybody was kind of like, be a little careful about that guy. And he ended up doing a shootout from the upper window of his house during the swim meet. And he shot the sheriff. He almost shot the whatever town leadership. I'm just curious if you remember that, because I can't find it anywhere online, and it was a big deal.
I be honest with you, I remember the name, but I don't remember that episode, to be honest with you. They've it gets kind of Western every once in a while in Montana.
It gets Western.
It's very exciting for all the kids. We were just like collecting, souvenirs, but it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, man. Well,
almost, but nothing compared to the Epstein files, right?
No, nothing. Thank God.
Compared to the Epstein files. So, as we go through this conversation and people join us here live, please feel free to throw questions in the chat. I'm kind of monitoring those. And admittedly, Ellie, I am behind on all of the in the weeds, in-depth stuff on Epstein, because there's just been so much to follow on top of the other news. But you've been digging into this. I mean, when did you start? When was your first real go around with these documents?
So with this round, I started kind of with everybody else, but I feel like this round of documents is the first time like we've had a much larger group of people actually digging through them, which is very helpful. It's not just like a handful of people doing everything. But I actually started. I was visiting Montana in July, and that's when I really started digging into these files because I didn't really know anything about them, and I was kind of hearing a little bit here and there, and I really I really find that factual information is very important. And so I was hearing a lot of, you see things through memes and things that are shared online. And I thought, I really want to know like what factually is behind this story and the connection with Donald Trump. Where do we have on the record? Where do we have actual documentation or interviews or photographs to prove that they were together at certain points in their life? And then I just kind of put them together in chronological order and posted it to my Substack, which nobody was reading at that point. And people really, really, really liked that. They liked just the visual timeline of everything that had happened. And so I thought, okay, I could write about that. And then I would just pick over time, I would just pick different topics that maybe weren't the hot topics, but they were things that I found interesting, like his time being hired into the Dalton School, without a degree, and then like being offered a job at the New York Times and Bear Stearns. And it's like, why does everybody want to work with this guy who's not qualified for anything? And, nuclear physicists are emailing him, asking him questions about physics. And it's just like, I don't understand what the underlying message is here, but I really focused in on that, like, okay, I'm going to just write about the stuff that I find interesting, and then maybe other people will find it interesting.
Yeah. So the files you're looking at, they've got to be pretty highly redacted, right?
Some are, yes. If the DOJ was paying attention, yes. If they were not, then no.
And so talk about how do you get underneath the redaction? How do you find out?
She is like a puzzle master. Like the stuff I've seen her already put together is incredible. We have someone in our chat saying that Ellie is our gopher. She's digging through the mess that was just released, and I think that's a fair statement. So yeah, like explain that. How do you get around those?
Well, it's not all me. I have worked with other people. I know the Krasensteins found a method of finding poorly redacted documents and how to unredact them. There was another woman who emailed me and she's like, I've been making these videos. I'm a font expert, so I can actually show how to detect based on font size from this list of names that we know that is amongst the choices behind this redaction, which name fits this and matches up with the font. Like really cool ways of detecting things, but then also like, my thing that I really enjoy looking at in these files are the email conversations between various people because they totally let their guard down, right? And they're all out of order. But if you look at them and you start to list them by date, you can see what the conversations look like. And when you find an email, what I do is if I find an email that's all highly redacted, I'll find some phrase in the email that's fairly unique. And then I'll search in the DOJ Epstein library, I'll search in quotes that unique phrase, and it'll find like 8 versions of that email. And between those 8 versions, I can usually get an unredacted version because they'll redact different things in different emails. And if you look at all 8 of them, you'll get the full email. And so I'll usually do it that way, which it takes a while. But like right now, I'm looking through Fergie's emails, and Fergie has 600 pages of emails. And there's some
let's be clear. Fergie, Sarah Ferguson, the ex-wife of Prince Andrew, not the other Fergie.
Yeah. Yes. And so like I'm able, and some people go, oh, how do you know that that's Fergie? That could be someone else that's redacted. And I'm like, well, I have 8 versions of this email. I can show you all of them together, create this whole email. And so you can usually get around a lot of the redactions that way because 98% of the redactions are not survivors. Like the survivors are very poorly redacted throughout these documents, but they're the people who send the email. So you'll get like Larry Summers of like Sultan bin Sulayem who's sending all the horrible like torture emails. Like those people are all redacted, but you very often will have people who are survivors and the redaction will just be like a line through their name. And it's like no effort is given.
Wow. And so the folks that you're finding that quite frankly committed the pedophiles, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Are these all folks that we would all know, or folks that are high up within government or business, or is it soup to nuts?
It is a very big, it's definitely bipartisan. There's no like bent on, political leanings, but it is very much divided by the wealth gap. These are all very, very, very wealthy people. There is nobody in there who's making under $100 million, really. I mean, it's the biggest. How do I say this? There are very, very, very long lists. I'm not interested in seeing a small list of co-conspirators. I know that it is a very long list. It is probably 100 different people. And there are places that I've found lists of men that were missed by the DOJ that were not redacted because, like, for instance, we found this coded journal that was from anywhere between like 1999 and 2003. And when you put it all together and you decode it, which wasn't hard, it was written by a teenager. There was a very long, there was a very long list of perpetrators in there that was not redacted because the DOJ didn't take the time to decode the journal. So now we have a long list of people who all worked at like AOL and who are like Virginia lawmakers. And, Larry Summers has mentioned. Leon Black is like a huge hitter in these documents. You have Alan Dershowitz, who's the lawyer. You have Jez Staley, who worked for JP Morgan, who is a big, close buddy of Epstein, and they did lots of like insider trading and weird things together. Like all these people are named, and it's a very credible source because it was before this was like a hot button issue and people were talking about it. This is not somebody who was writing with the intent of submitting it to the FBI. It was just a kid in a journal. And so I find that very credible, and those are the names that I pay attention to.
And so can I ask, when did this start and when did it end?
What?
What year?
Like Epstein being heinous.
The files. When did the files start and when do they end?
I mean, the very beginnings of the files are around his time meeting Leslie Wexner, so in the 80s. I personally believe, and I don't have, a ton of evidence for this, but I personally believe that when Epstein graduated from high school, he took a trip to Europe and he went with like a friend and he spent time in Europe, and people said he came back different. And right after that is when he started working for the Dalton School, when he was being hired places, when he was starting to be mentored by these like billionaire people who are in global finance and politics. And I personally believe something happened on that trip, and I don't know how or what it was. But that seems to be like the breaking point before all of a sudden he just skyrocketed. But it starts in the 80s. It definitely starts around the time he met Leslie Wexner, and it goes right up until he died. And I don't think it's over. I don't think any of these people necessarily stopped doing the things that they were doing.
We've asked the question since you brought it up when he died. What do you?
Yes.
How do you think? Have you seen any evidence that would indicate how he died?
There's just, I think that it's just so muddled. It could be that he killed himself. He has talked about not lasting very long in solitary and that kind of thing in his interviews with Steve Bannon. But at the same time, when you think about his first court case, he had 2 indictments. After being accused by 36 girls, he had only 2 indictments. And he was able to leave the jail. He was able to have a bail and like leave until he was, put in jail. He only had 2 indictments this time around. So it's like, I don't think he would have thought that it was going to be a worst case scenario. And there are also a lot of very weird, if you kind of dig through like the list of his cellmates and their backgrounds, and like some of the people they put him with were like, it was one of the guys, I forget his name, but he was the guy who was sending like explosive devices to the Obamas and Hillary Clinton. Like that was going to be his roommate. And it was just like, why would you put 2 so high profile people together? But then something also to remember is when we see the video, there's this cell block video that people have sort of analyzed. A lot of people think that video is looking at Epstein's cell. But those doors aren't actually where he was staying. It's just that that's the closest camera. There was only 2 cameras out of 11 working in his cell block that night. And so most of the place has no footage. And that includes where he was actually being housed. So you can't actually see his cell block from those cameras, but that's what people are using to kind of base their intuitions. So I don't know. My answer is I don't know. I know credible people in journalism who really believe that he did not kill himself. But I don't know. I don't have all the information.
I think that's the thing about this whole case is that it's just ripe for conspiracy theories. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff that you've uncovered and decoded, Ellie, like it shows that the truth is just as awful as some of the theories out there. And so I think that lends itself to really to be open to, like, well, what is real? What is the truth? Will we ever know the truth? And I'm wondering, like, how do you sift through all that? I mean, I see stuff all the time where I think, oh, there's no way. But then I think, well, I don't know. The latest one I saw is this video of people saying he's still alive. Jeffrey Epstein's still alive.
Yeah.
How do you sift through this and separate fact from fiction?
I dig. I am very steeped in anti-conspiracy theory. I think I grew up with a lot of conspiracy theory stuff around me. So I am just so very careful about verifying information. So for example, the video that people are showing of, supposedly Epstein walking around with, I think, bodyguards in Israel, I think is what it was. We were able to dig back and find that there was a Google Gemini symbol in the corner, and then somebody else said, and also if you translate the signs in the background in Hebrew, they don't actually say anything. So there are ways to really double check all that stuff, because usually if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If something is the politician you hate the most, and you get a picture of them doing the worst deed that is the most convicting, double check it, because everything just is so hard to sift through, and I work really hard at trying to stop misinformation if I see it, even especially if it's I see people who believe the exact same thing that I do, but it's so easy to spread misinformation because there's so much information. And so, somebody sent me something today and they wanted to know if it was true. It was like an advertisement supposedly in an Ohio newspaper. Jeffrey Epstein was asking for a nanny. And I said, I don't know if this is true. I'll contact that newspaper and double check, because I don't think he ever put his name on classified ads. I know Ghislaine Maxwell did, but I'm pretty sure he never did. So I said, I don't know if it's true. It seems a little untrue to me, but I'm going to double check it just to make sure, because I don't want to spread it if I don't know.
Smart.
So
I don't always get it right.
I got you. So you probably know more about what's in those files than anybody else, would be my guess. Maybe with the exception of some folks in the Department of Justice. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the president, when he ran on releasing the Epstein files, and then things changed. Any idea on why that changed?
Well, I think he ran on things that he thought would get him elected, but he never really intended to do most of them. There was an open investigation into the Epstein files. I don't know how thorough or deep or intense it was, but there was an open one, and he closed it his first day in office. So he ended that investigation, and people didn't seem to, his base was really steeped in this idea of child trafficking. And you think of QAnon, and you think of, some of the stuff that has turned out to be accurate. But then when we're giving the evidence, like here it exists, all of a sudden they're saying, nope, never mind. It's a good lesson in how malleable the human brain is when they have something they want. And so I don't think he ever intended to go. It's kind of like Elon Musk saying, Trump's in the Epstein files, when he knew full well he was in the Epstein. Why say it?
Right.
Yeah, why say it? But I think it's because they don't think there's ever going to be accountability or follow-up. And I think Trump is, in that way, he's very childlike. Like, kids do not think 2 steps ahead. They think, I want satisfaction right now. And they don't think that, oh, I'm going to actually follow up on this later. And I don't think he thinks on that level. I think he just thinks of immediate gratification. And so I'm going to tell people what they want to hear. So I get elected, and then I'm not going to do it later. I'm just going to ignore it.
So we all watched the Bondi hearings in front of Congress last week. I don't know if we all watched them, but watched a fair amount of them. What do you think is going to come of all this stuff? I mean, it's you've got a pile of victims. I mean, just a pile of victims out there that were abused, and there wasn't a lot of empathy from at least Bondi put towards the victims. At least it didn't appear that way in the hearing. Do you think this is just a rat running in a circle cage, or do you think something will come of it? And if you do think something's going to come of it, what do you think that will be?
I think that there are enough people who were following Bondi and who were following Trump that are disappointed by that, especially within the administration. There's just enough that we're starting to chip away at that. And I think that we'll see that at the midterms. I really do. I think we will see a shift in the balance of power. And I wonder what people like Pam Bondi think of like long term. What is her long term goal? Because ultimately, if the power shifts, then a lot of what she's doing is illegal. And so how is she going to, handle that in 6 months or a year, whatever it is? But again, it's one of those immediate gratification things. She's only thinking about now.
That is correct. So let's assume that there is a shift. Then what do Democrats have to do if they get in a position of power in Congress? What do they need to do on this issue to make sure that the victims get some sort of some sort of justice?
I think they need to stop worrying about politics and campaigns, honestly. And I think that's something that's really gotten in the way of just going a full-fledged into an investigation, is people are thinking ahead about their campaign for whatever their next step is. And they're being careful because they want to make sure that they have a certain amount of voters, and they want to make sure to stay closer to the center. I think if we're going to fight this and we're going to investigate it and we're going to see an end to this, they have to forget about their campaigns and their politics, and they have to prioritize this. And I think ultimately, if they do prioritize this, that will only benefit their campaigns in the end, because people will see that they actually stood up and did something.
So I was in the Senate for a good number of years, and I've got to be honest with you, from my perspective, I don't see the downside of holding people accountable in this particular situation at all. I don't see a downside of holding criminals accountable, period.
Yeah.
How and I get it. I mean, there's way too much money in campaigns. We've had a number of shows on this, and we'll have some more on it before we're done. But I have a hard time thinking, if I'm running for the United States Senate or a House district, how this is going to affect me negatively by getting the truth out.
I think that's because you're a good person and you're logical. I can't say that is the same for everybody.
You're a good person, Senator.
We gotta have Ellie on more. I'm just saying, she needs to be on every show.
Thank you. I'll be your opening segment.
There you go.
No, I just think anytime.
Thank you. I just think that so much of this is logical. And for most people, if they were separated out and asked certain questions and they said the logical answer, we would all be saying the same thing. Like, of course, that would just be common sense to stand up for people who need it and to fight bad people. But there's nothing logical about what's happening. And even the response from Democrats is not all that logical. They've felt very, any way the wind blows, and kind of weak. And it's disappointing, I know, for the Democrat base to not see people just like fighting tooth and nail for this. This is the opportunity, if you want to show that you're a strong party. This is, I mean, of all times in our history, this is probably one of the bigger opportunities to do so.
Except for the fact that during that hearing, the ones I watched anyway, and I didn't watch the whole hearing on C-SPAN, but the Democrats were pretty She didn't answer any of their questions, but
Yeah.
they were pretty pointed with what they wanted to know. And look, they didn't have the chairmanship of that committee, so the chairman has a lot of power in those hearings. He has a lot of power in those hearings to force the person on the other side of the rostrum to answer the questions. By the way, a person who was under oath when they were at that hearing. And so I would just tell you, I personally hope that if things do change, and I think it's a long time between now and the election, but I hope you're correct, that I hope that regardless who it is, regardless how much money they have, regardless how much political power they have, that they have a hearing and they get the damn questions answered from the Department of Justice, who is not supposed to be the president's attorney, is supposed to be the United States of America's attorney, by the way.
Right.
Well, I think that you bring up some...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Ellie.
I was just going to say some of the questions should have been easy to answer. Like the idea of standing up and saying, I'm sorry, we've drug our feet. We'll do better for you guys. You deserved better. Like that wasn't partisan. That should have been an easy, like, you bet I can turn around and do that and just acknowledge that they are here. But she wouldn't do it.
And I think too, like, let's just point out, she wasn't just anybody going to testify before a House committee. This is the Attorney General of the United States. And there was the one clip where somebody said, like, let's get back to you. And she's like, oh, I bet we are. Like, yeah, that's why you're there. You're there to answer questions. That's literally your job today. But I do want to break down, like you bring up the point of the survivors who were there, who stood up, and she wouldn't Attorney General Pam Bondi wouldn't turn around. She wouldn't look at them. She said she wasn't going to get in the gutter for dramatics or theatrics or something insulting along those lines. And I'm just wondering, I know that in the past, Ellie, you've talked to some of these survivors. Have you talked to any of them since that hearing about how that felt to them? Because as somebody who's just watched this all unfold, I was so angry on their behalf. And as a woman, I was so angry on their behalf. Have you talked to any of them?
I haven't. I haven't talked since the hearing. I've only like seen their kind of conversations objectively through other people. But I think the consensus was there that was obviously a slap in the face. But also, and this is kind of sad because I feel like a lot of us feel very, very angry. But I think some people, some survivors just walk away and they're just like shrugging their shoulders because that's, this is not the first time that this has happened to them. This will probably not be the last time that this has happened to them, and they're tired. And I feel very upset and frustrated for them that they feel that way, and it's not their fault that they feel that way, obviously. But it's just, I mean, how long do you keep going? This is what, 3 decades in, and only now, like you think about Maria Farmer, submitting her FBI report in 1996, and she was told for decades that it didn't exist and that she'd never done it. And like what? A month ago, we finally discovered it in the files that it had been there the whole time, and the FBI was telling her that she was crazy. Like that's the type of thing that's been happening. Like all this stuff is really shocking to us, and we're seeing really horrible things, but the FBI has had them for 20, 30 years and done nothing about them. And so I feel like if we're holding to people to account for committing crimes, we should hold the DOJ to account for committing the same crimes.
Well, and there's a lot of talk in that hearing too about, especially from Pam Bondi, about, well, why didn't Biden do this? Why didn't Biden? And I think it was Representative Massey who says, yeah, this spans multiple administrations. But I'm just wondering your take on that, because from my understanding, the only reason this is released now is that Congress passed a bill that was signed by the president to release all of this. I mean, do you think where does the blame lie for not getting to this sooner? Is it Congress? Is it the DOJ of a certain administration? Is it like, where do you think there could have been action sooner?
Originally, probably Alex Acosta. I mean, that would have been the end of it. You know what I mean? If he had been properly prosecuted the first time around, we never would have gotten here. He had 11 more years to abuse girls with his friends. I think the reason, like, yeah, of course, we should hold everyone accountable in every administration for not taking this on and taking it more seriously, because it was a big case. But and I do know that there was an open investigation with the Biden administration. I don't know how intent they were with prosecuting. But you have to remember that ultimately, I feel like this is a very citizen-run investigation. Like, the reason why we're all talking about it and the reason why it's such a big deal is not because the DOJ like hopped up and was like, let's do this, guys. It was because people figured it out and they started talking about it and they started digging into the files and they started paying attention and they started asking for accountability. Like it's the we the people moment where we stepped up and said, okay, now you do this for us because you didn't do it for them. Like step it up. And I think ultimately that's why it's such a big deal right now is people are screaming. And yeah, I don't know. It should have been done a long time ago. It's a big mess.
It appears, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I could be wrong, but it appears that other countries are holding people accountable for those actions. But yet
Correct.
here in the United States of America, it was supposed to be the beaming light for democracy. And it seems like people are dragging their feet to hold people accountable. I don't get it. Clue me in here. Why? I honest to God don't get it.
No, again, you're dealing with logic. This is not logic. I think it's a lot of it has to do with, this whole criminal aspect of it was very global. It was definitely not centered in the United States. It was money laundering, racketeering, sex trafficking. I mean, it was across the world. It was every government. It was every global finance minister. It really didn't leave anybody out. And I think partially because what's Trump's done in the last year in severing all of our ties around the world, people are happy to sever their ties with anything connected to a major, American criminal sex trafficking case. They're like, take them. We don't want them. Whereas America, here, our administration wants to like bond more tightly together and stand their ground for whatever reason. The rest of the world's like, we're not going to do that. We're going to set an example.
I do want to just point out too, I mean, first of all, Representative Jasmine Crockett talked to us about that. She had just come from a briefing when we talked to her last year, and she said, I just can't believe how far this goes, and she couldn't say more at the time. But what I think is incredible about the work you're doing, Ellie, is that it's very obvious to me that your brain works in a very organized, high-speed way that mine does not. But also you have this community. I mean, I'm seeing it in the comments right now as we're live. People are in your court here. They are not only in your court cheering you on, but they're sending you stuff. I've seen people send stuff in the chat about, hey, look into this, look into that. And from my years of reporting, that has been the most effective way of telling really important stories, is to get people who are invested in it involved and helping with the whole process. So is there, from where you sit, like when you wake up every day, and I don't want you to give too much away here, but when you wake up, do you have this like mapped out on how you're going to do this? Or you can literally take it day by day?
Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I've got my right. No, what I do is I think it's been good for me to see this massive amount of files come out this last time, because it's made me accept the fact that I can't do this totally on my own. That would be ridiculous. For a little while, it felt like there was just, again, a small handful of us really digging through these files. But I started to put the word out because people were very interested in how they could help. And, like me, everybody was like, I'm not qualified for this, but I have this skill, or I know this guy, or I could do this. And really, if you can read and you're just very interested, like everybody is qualified. And so I said, I've downloaded all the files into a Dropbox. If you guys just want a link to the Dropbox and you want to scroll the files with me, you don't have to start at the beginning, just start somewhere in the middle. They're all out of order. And let me know what you find. And originally that worked because it was just kind of a handful of us. And now it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So we're trying to figure out a next step for how to like categorize it and have like central location for information so that we can all look at it and make it make sense. But it's really cool to see people come forward and want to help, because they're usually the things that I present, I'm like, I didn't find this. This is somebody brought this to me, and this is really amazing. And then I've sent things off to Jasmine Crockett. Like I sent off the coded journal. I sent that to her because she wanted something that she could hold in her hand and look at that made sense before she went into her skiff and out on the floor. That was something that really showed what these files were saying. And I said, well, I've got a journal. And so I sent it to her right away, and she looked at it, and that's just something concrete that we can do as citizens for this process.
A couple questions. How many representatives from the House or the Senate have been in contact with you about getting information?
I've talked to two. I've talked to Jamie Raskin, and I've talked to Jasmine Crockett.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so as I've approached this from the standpoint of pedophilia. I haven't approached it from the standpoint of money laundering or racketeering.
Right.
Could you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure.
What did you see?
Well, I think the biggest and easiest portion to understand, because there's a lot of it is unknown, right? We're like, where did this guy get all this money all of a sudden? No college degree. But there's a case called the U.S. Virgin Islands versus J.P. Morgan, which is fairly easy for a layman to read, that kind of fleshes out a lot of the things that should have been paid attention to by J.P. Morgan 100 years ago, and they ignored because he was a top 3 client. And an example of that is he had 134 bank accounts at J.P. Morgan, which should have been a red flag immediately.
He being Epstein, correct?
Epstein had 134 bank accounts. And what he would do is he would make bank accounts for underage girls, and he didn't even have them with him. They had no ID. They weren't in the room. He would just say, I want a bank account for so-and-so. And they would give him a bank account for so-and-so. And they were all Eastern European girls. They weren't American girls. And what would happen is he would put money in those accounts, and the money would go back to wherever they were from. He would pay the girls in the US, he would pay them under the table so that there was no paper trail. But he was sending money through these girls' accounts back to Eastern Europe and various countries in the guise of paying these girls. But there's no like birthdays on their accounts. There's very little information other than what country they're from, what their name is, and then like a place to send the money. And JP Morgan knew this the whole time and did nothing about it. That you'd see it brought up in emails every so often that maybe we should pay attention to this. And then they go, nah, but he's a top 3 client. Let's just keep going. And so there's a lot of corruption within JP Morgan.
And then the question becomes, where the hell were the regulators? Where were the regulators?
Right. I mean, the regulators were the ones who were like chumming it up with him. You had Jez Staley, and he was like a best buds, and so he could, and you see it, all his stocks are in JP Morgan, and by gum, every time he bought stocks, they went up, so there's a lot of corruption within the system. And even with Jamie Dimon said that he knew nothing, he wasn't there, he never spent time with him. And now you start to see these emails that are like, Jamie Dimon's coming over for dinner, what kind of snacks does he like? And so it's like, why is everybody lying? Like, why is everybody involved? Where was somebody who just said, nah, I'm not going to do that, that's wrong? Like, where was that?
Yeah. Great question.
Ellie, first of all, I want to know, how are you taking care of your own mental health as you go through this as much as you are?
I get that question probably daily. For me, I have had a small business for about 14 years where I run a transcription business. And so I worked on the Weinstein story. I worked with all the Me Too. I worked with like the Woody Allen story. I worked with a lot of legal stuff. I'm working on a film right now that has to do with child abuse. Like, this is not my first go around with this type of thing. Definitely on the scale, it is my first go around. I don't think there's anything on this scale. But for better or for worse, I am able to kind of shake stuff and go to bed at night, put my kids to bed, have dinner with my family, and not really hang on to things emotionally. I think where I struggle is just being on camera, maybe a little bit. I've spent
I don't think you're
years
struggling there. I think you're amazing. I think you're amazing.
Inside. I've spent a lot of years being a fly on the wall with like journalism and some really big stories, and I think just coming sort of onto the stage a little bit has been something I'm working through and figuring out, and trying to set boundaries and go for a run, or like breathe a little bit. That's something that has been probably the most hard for me in this process. But the actual subject matter, thankfully, I can really see. I can see the forest for all the trees, and it is why am I digging through these files? Like, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? And the purpose is that we're going to have a better world on the other end of this, if we can just get it right. And so that motivates me and keeps me, as sunny and positive as I possibly can, and I can sleep at night.
So we've got folks that are watching this podcast and they've watched you on other podcasts. Is there a place that you can send people to get information that is good information?
Sure. I mean, I generally pretty often will post like Dropbox links on my notes of my Substack, which are links to the files, so they can look at them. They cannot be further redacted. They can't be deleted. They are pulled from the DOJ's original drop, and they are now in my Dropbox, so they can't be removed. That's probably the best method. I do know that there are other people who have done the same thing. There is something called Gmail, which is really, really helpful. Have you seen that?
I showed it to Senator Tester a couple of weeks ago.
It's genius.
We played with it. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes. So Gmail is actually, it's gmail.world. It's actually set up to look like a Gmail account, but it's literally all the Jeffrey Epstein emails since the beginning of time. And I don't know, I'm guessing they didn't just type them in. Somebody had to somehow figure out an algorithm to pop that in there, but that is really helpful. I usually, again, there are people who reach out to me and they'll be like, oh, I saw this document. Is this document real? I think learning how to ask that question and then learning how to look to back up something. Like if I found this file, somebody said this wild and crazy file is part of the Epstein files and it has a file number on the bottom, and I'll say, great, I want you to go to the DOJ, I want you to look at the Epstein library, and I want you to look up that file number. And if it is the document you have in your hand, then it's real. That's not to say that they aren't deleting things from the DOJ, but most things you can still find if you have a file number or if you have a unique phrase. It's pretty easy to look things up there. But it's a lot of information. And I think people need to understand that going in, that you will not get through all of it, but every little bit helps.
And I just think too, I mean, like I said, the work you're doing is amazing, and you're doing it for the right reasons, obviously. And I agree with everybody who's commenting about like really the hero's work that you were doing. And you also just launched, I just watched your very first kind of deep dive show on Blue Ant Media. And so you're going to do that weekly. Like, tell us what we can expect from that.
Yeah, so every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a deep dive, and it's very bare bones right now because we're just figuring out what we want to look like. And my husband promised to write a theme song for me, so he'll be singing in the background. He can't sing, but that's okay. But yeah, so it's just kind of, we'll go over a few things. It really emphasizes that we can all do this together. This is not anybody's super skill to be able to investigate or look into something. All the years that we've been watching Dateline, like, built up to this moment that we have the ability to look at something and determine fact or fiction. How do we figure it out? Who is involved? Putting pieces together, starting to look at email threads, and also recognizing that we may see people that we really, really like show up in these files, and how to accept that it's really everybody. It's not just the people we don't like who are going to show up, and how to talk about that, and what's the importance of that, and then how to move forward from that. And we just kind of have like a community conversation every Friday, just round out the day, move along in our afternoon. It's really great.
I'll add on top. Oh, sorry, Senator. I'll just add on top of Dateline, I'll add Mariska Hargitay and SVU too. Like, we are ready for this moment because of this. Go ahead, Senator.
Well, I just want to make sure, because I think most people aren't technologically wise, and I'm one of those. So the show is at 2 p.m. Eastern, you said, and where at?
Yes. So it's through Substack, but they record it on YouTube, and it's through Blue Amp Media.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great place because honestly, people, they're talking about this and they have ideas about this and they have questions about this. And I think it's just great to even just open up that forum and just hash it out. I mean, it's really great work. I just want to make sure though, like, do you feel this is going to, I'm sorry, I have to ask as a mom, like, you feel safe? Do you feel worried about your safety?
I think I'm a little naive to it, I'm sure. I do have people who have been working in journalism for a very long time who have stepped up to mentor me. You are one of those people. It's been a really wonderful experience entering the journalism world because I expected it to feel more competitive and, more story and it's just not. Like, everybody has gone like, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can I help? You want to come on my show? Do you want to just chat? You want to just like Katie Fang is just like
the
I
best.
told you, like, she's like hanging out with my auntie. Like, it's just like everybody is so nice. But then along with that, they're like, Ellie, I saw that you posted a picture of snow in your neighborhood. Let's pull that picture down because someone might be able to screenshot your neighborhood. And so that's been a really, because I've only ever been like a nobody on Facebook with my family and friends and posting my kids and nobody cared. And so now that is something to pay attention to. That is something that people are helping me with and going like, this is the thing to keep an eye out for. Just be really careful. We dug into something a few weeks ago that got some eyes on it, and Trump ended up posting about it on Truth Social. And I just thought, I don't really want to be 1 degree away from Donald Trump. That's not high on my list. So it is something I pay attention to. I don't feel like threatened. I haven't got any like death threats or anything like that. I'm really protective about how people can contact me. But it is something I definitely think about. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're here. I mean, between the two of us, we've been on the receiving end of stuff like that. And so, we're here for you anytime. And,
Thank you.
But you're doing incredible work. And I hope that just keeps you going and going and going every day, because really it's so important. And I know that people are so grateful for you.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for you guys too.
So if there's one thing that, or 5 things, I don't really care.
Don't get me started.
That you want the viewers and listeners to know, what is it?
I'm a mom. I do this because I have kids that are entering the world. I think it's important to, this is a very salacious story. This is, for as horrible as it is, it can also be very, almost in a terrible way, can be very entertaining, and people get really caught up in it. I think it's important to remember why we're doing this. It's not because it is tabloid fodder. It's not because it's like breaking news. It's because it's a story about children being hurt. And, whether you have your own children or a child or children exist in the world, which I think that covers everybody. Ultimately, our job as adults is to protect them and provide them with a place and a world where they have rights and they have safety and they have the ability to do what they want with their lives without being traumatized on the way up. And so I am doing that for my kids. I'm doing that for other people's children. I'm doing that for the kids who didn't have that when we were growing up in the 90s. I just keep my eye on that prize, that we are creating potentially a world where it doesn't matter how much money and power you have. If you harm somebody, you will go to jail for it, and you will go to the jail for the rest of your life for it. And ultimately that's why I do this.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yes, you
absolutely.
too.
And I just have to say, before we let you go, Ellie, I know you have a lot, so much going on. So thank you for
Chinese thing.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, that's a big night. So make sure you support Ellie, of course, on Substack here, on our live channel. You can just click right there on the Panicked Writer and you can subscribe, and that supports her work. And make sure you share it with people, because that's how we spread these communities, right? You share it with the people you know and love, and who hear this or be more informed. But I also just need to share, because Montana is like the biggest small town. So you guys talked at the very beginning about her grandfather's Ford dealership in Fort Benton, Montana. Yeah. But when I was looking, like, it just popped up on a mutual friend, and one of my very best friends knows Ellie because their husbands work together. I mean, there's just like, it's such a little small world.
A giant neighborhood. Yeah.
Giant neighborhood. And it just reminds us, like, no matter where you are, no matter where you live, like, I didn't know you a year ago, Ellie. You live over on the East Coast, and like, we are all in this together. I love those connections because it just reminds us we're all here together and take care of one another.
Yeah, it was very special. I was very excited to talk to you guys because I was like, oh, I need a Montana conversation. This is very good.
Have any other Montana-isms we need to talk about before we let you go?
Oh, no. I mean, I could start rattling off relatives and he'd be like, oh, yeah, I know that person. Oh, I know that person. But yeah, we could do that for another time.
I know, it's the whole game of like, oh, do you know this? Yeah, oh, do you know this?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Ellie. And we're actually going to meet in person next week.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
Next week on Wednesday. Yeah, we can talk about that.
So next week, Senator Tester is going to be on a panel at this event in DC hosted by Defiance, which is Miles Taylor's group. And he's going to be on a panel with Glenn Kirshner and Sue Gordon, and we'll be going live throughout the night, and we will get to see you there, Ellie. So I'm so excited to meet you.
Yes, I will be there. We will have a little Blue Ant Media table somewhere around there somewhere.
Okay, so we'll keep talking. So make sure you check that out because that'll be a good event. And I think that's all we have. Anything else I'm missing, Senator, from you to talk to Ellie about?
Just a big thank you to you, Ellie. We appreciate what you're doing, and appreciate the information. And I just got to say, I hope in the end, I don't care. I hope people win over power for sure, and the folks who have been harmed get some sort of remedy to that harm. And it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough. Yeah. But the truth is, there needs to be some at least, because there's none right now.
Nothing. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Always keep them in mind. I think that's the whole key. Whenever we're talking about this, it's easy to get distracted by Pam Bondi and all these things, but there are people and survivors in this world and their families who are hurting every time it comes up without justice. So really remember to keep them in mind. Thank you so much, Ellie. We'll talk again.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.
Okay. So Senator, one thing I just wanted to mention on top of that is that we talked about it a little bit with Ellie, but in that hearing with Pam Bondi, she talked about how hard it was to redact all the victims' names, and if they're flagged, they'll go back and redact them. I mean, that was shocking to me because you can't undo that. You can't put their names out and undo that and put the toothpaste back in the tube. Did you see that section?
Yeah, I did, and you're absolutely 100% correct. And the other part that just drives me insane about that whole hearing is when somebody asked a question and she started talking about the stock market and how well it was doing. I mean, I don't even know if she really realized what she was saying, but what she was saying was, what's important here is the stock market, but the victims aren't what's important here. And it just goes against everything how I was raised, quite frankly. This is about people. This is about how people's lives were destroyed, quite frankly, and changed in a way not for the better. And to pivot to say, well, the stock market's doing great, it just is a total lack of awareness of what the hell she's even in that hearing room for.
Well, and they're not having any problem redacting names of potential co-conspirators or other people involved. So that's not a problem for them. I want what Ellie's doing, what she talked about with the, multiple files and going in and searching the words and finding them. I mean, it just shows, first of all, how disorganized this whole process has been from the DOJ. But second of all, the amazing amount of detail and work going into this by Ellie and others who are part of this. So again, hats off. Thank you so much. We want to plug that later this week, we have been talking about these proposals from the Trump administration to nationalize elections, federalize elections. Of course, there's the SAVE Act we need to talk about. So we are going to talk about that more in depth later this week with David Becker from the Center for Election Innovation and Research. So we're going to talk about all of that. Send us your questions. And we just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. What we do here on Grounded is, as you can tell, Senator Tester, this is a very organic podcast because you can see like the light shining out of the side of his face. He doesn't have a very good setup right now, but that's okay. We're just glad you're here, Senator. So what we do at the end of each show is we talk about his hat. So what does your hat say today?
Well, let me see here. I don't know if I wore this before, but it says Northwest on it. So it's interesting. This hat was given to me in 2011 when there was a group of Little League kids from Billings that I think made it to the semifinals of the World Series, the Little League World Series. And make you proud that a bunch of kids from Montana who only play baseball 4 or 5 months out of the year, competing with folks who play it 365 days out of the year and were competitive and made it to the semifinals. And by the way, those kids now 15 years later in their late 20s. So it's pretty amazing.
That's a great hat, though. I like it.
It. By the way, it is really a great hat, not only for what it has on the front and the champions of 2011 on the back, but it's a fitted hat, so it fits my big head, so it's good.
Oh, well, that's amazing. Well, yeah, I can't wait to see. Did you bring more than one hat on this trip? Or you're going to be back home for our next show, so you'll be okay.
Yeah, I will be back home for the next show, so it's good.
Okay.
I'll have better lighting.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And
All right.
I'll have better connection, too, so it's good.
Hey, it worked out. We're just so glad. We're just so glad that everyone could hop on and we could chat with Ellie. It will not be our last time because she's just incredible. Thank you to Ellie for joining us. Thank you to all of you. We want to say thank you to Pearl Jam, who lets us use their music every episode, which is always just like a pinch me moment when I get to say that. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. We'll talk to you soon.
Tally ho.